My name is Wade the Trucker, and this is my 2010 Ford Crown Victoria that I've been daily driving for over 4 years. Since then, I've bought 2 more and made over 90 videos on my YouTube channel specifically about the Crown Victoria and Panther platform. So it goes to show that I know my stuff about the Crown Victoria. So sit back and relax as I tell you everything you need to know about the Ford Crown Victoria. Starting off with something very simple, we have the P7 VIN codes. The Ford Crown Victoria, as we know it, was produced from 1992 until the year 2011, and it served many different roles throughout the years. The easiest way to tell what type of life your car has lived is to look at its VIN number. The 5th and 6th digit that you'll find on your VIN code will always be P7, but it's the 7th digit that tells the full story of what your car was. The options you will find will range between 0 and 4, and depending on the year, A through E. P70 and P70A VINs were long wheelbase fleet vehicles. Most of the time they were taxi or livery, but sometimes you'd see just an old grandpa driving one of them. P72 and P7C VIN codes were also fleet vehicles. They were also the base model VIN for export to the Middle East. P73 and P7D VIN codes were base model vehicles mostly sold to civilians. P74 and P7E codes were your high-trim Ford Crown Victorias. These VINs were mostly your handling and performance package and your LX Sport package. And finally, the most well-known one, the P71 and the P7B, were the Police Interceptor model. In 2009-2010, lawmakers introduced a law that made all manufacturers have to have a letter as their 7th digit on their VIN codes. That's why all 2010 and 2011 Crown Victorias have letters instead of numbers on their 7th digit on their VIN. Throughout the years, Ford offered the Crown Victoria with multiple different rear differential ratios. The way you could tell what gear ratio your car has is to look at the door tag underneath where it says axle. If your axle code has Z5, you have an open differential with 327 gears. If you have an X5, like this car, you have a limited slip differential with 327 gears. And if you have a C8 axle code, then you have a limited slip differential with 355 gears. Depending on the year and gear ratio, your car will have a variable top speed limiter. Cars with 355 rear ends will have a much lower top speed than cars with 327s. Cars with 355s are generally limited around 118 miles per hour, whereas the 327 gear ratio has a limiter around 129. There are ways to get around the speed limiter, mostly with the use of a Marty tune, but take it from a guy who has definitely not hit speed limiter, you don't really want to get anywhere close without some serious modifications. I have a friend who has passed the speed limiter on his old Lincoln Town car, and this is what he has to say. At around 110, these cars start floating, and every movement of the wheel is sketchy. I felt like the car was going to veer itself off of the highway. So take it from a man who's lived it, and upgrade your suspension before you go anywhere above the high speed limit. Or just don't break the law, I guess. Across all years of the Police Interceptor and on some fleet model vehicles, you will find a trunk release button on the center of your dash. Some of you might have noticed that this button only works if your key is in the accessory or run position. The rest of you are wondering, what the hell are you talking about? If we take off the center trim piece and look to where the button is, you'll find that there are actually 2 connectors, one plugged into the button and another one left dangling. One of them is accessory power, meaning that your key has to be on in order for the button to work, and the other is constant power, meaning that your button will work without a key. Knowing this is extremely helpful because with the button plugged into the accessory only, the only way to actually get into this trunk is to physically break into it. And that might be a really good thing if you live in maybe a high crime area where you're more worried about leaving stuff out in your car, or if you're going out to an area that you don't know. Knowing this trick has actually helped me a lot because I have accidentally locked my keys in the trunk, but the car was unlocked, so all I had to do was pull the trim piece off and swap the connectors over, and yippee-ki-yay, I'm out of here. Have you ever wondered what this little button on the end of your shift column is? This is your overdrive on-off button. There are different definitions of overdrive, but the definition that we'll be using is a gear in which the output shaft speed of the transmission is higher than the input shaft of the transmission. These cars have 4-speed transmissions. Gears 1 through 3 have a shorter gear ratio in order to get this car up and moving. The effective gear ratio of our overdrive gear is 0.7 to 1, or 0.7 rotations of the flex plate per 1 rotation of the output shaft of the transmission. When you press this button, you disable your transmission from shifting into this 4th gear. This is a good feature if you plan on towing with these cars, since being able to disengage overdrive means that you have higher accessible power, say if you were towing something up a hill. There is a lot of confusion surrounding this button, with some people saying that it makes their car go faster, which, well, it actually does the opposite. It makes their car slower in top speed, since you are disabling the highest gear ratio, which limits your top speed to whatever the top of 3rd gear is. Here is something interesting that you probably don't know you could do with your 2006 and up Crown Victorias, and this is a little something called test mode. So follow these steps. Put the key in. We're going to hold the odometer button, start the car while still holding onto the odometer button, and you will see soon that the odometer will say test. You could do the same thing with message center cars like Lincoln Town Car and Mercury Grand Marquis by pressing down the reset and select buttons at the same time. Just follow that same process as we would with the odometer button on these simple style gauges. The test mode has some really neat features, but none more important than the DTC reader. Instead of having to go out and buy a code reader to be able to tell what your check engine light is for, you could actually go into test mode and scroll all the way until you hit DTC. To prove this, I'm going to disconnect my motor's temperature sensor, which will create a check engine code. Side note, this is actually the way that you test if your coolant fan has actually gone bad, is if you unplug the temperature sensor and the fan does not almost immediately kick on, then either your fan or your fan module has gone bad, or you have some other electrical gremlin that's keeping them from turning on. Our coolant fan should kick on all the way. Yep. Go here, and now we have a DTC. While we're here at the gauge cluster, let's answer another common question, and that is, are idle hours important? In order to find your idle hours, all you have to do is press the trip button twice, and it'll display the amount of hours that your car has. Keep in mind that only 2006 and up Ford Crown Victorias have this option, and if you have anything other than the basic odometer, then you will have to use a computer in order to find your idle hours. In general, 1 idle hour is equivalent to around 30 driven miles. So if you have 2100 idle hours like this car does, your car will have approximately 63,000 more miles on your car than what's shown on your odometer. However, that's not entirely true because idle hours actually wear and affect an engine differently than actual driven hours. An idle hour means that only the engine and other driven components are actually being worn, whereas driven miles, where the car is actually moving, you find wear on pretty much every item. As well, the engine wears a lot less idling at 750 RPM compared to when it's hauling a 4,000-pound boat down the road. In my opinion, idle hours are definitely something to look out for, but not something to be afraid of. If you are out looking to buy a Crown Victoria, try and stay away from cars with over 8,000 idle hours. For those viewers who live in northern states like myself, you know that driving a rear-wheel drive car in the snow sucks worse than Monica Lewinsky.
I do not have special leg.
However, there are a few ways to make driving a Crown Victoria in the snow a little bit better. The main way is to invest in a good set of snow tires. Ideally, you want to have snow tires all around, but if you're a little bit budget oriented, you can get away with having snow tires on the rear, or you could run snow tires on the rear for a season, and very much like what I did is take those snow tires, move them up to the front, and the next year, when you get the money to buy another set, you could put a new set on the rear and have a set of tires on the front. Now, it's very common to hear people put sandbags or a lot of extra weight in the trunk of their Crown Victorias, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. Adding more weight to the car gives your car just a little bit more push down, a little bit more traction. It helps a lot. But one thing that I would do different is, instead of maybe having 3 sandbags or however much you plan on putting in, at least have 1 bag of road salt. That way, if you do get stuck on an icy road or whatever, you could throw some of that salt down to try and get you up and out of there. That's actually helped me on several occasions. Shout out to this Reddit user for being incredibly useful in the creation of this video. He's incredibly knowledgeable and has really helped a lot of people on the Reddit. So thank you, you're the best. Do you know who else is the best? Every last one of you who made it to the end of this video. Seriously, without you guys, I could be inside eating tacos and not standing outside talking to a phone and
freezing my nuts off.
So if you've enjoyed the knowledge that you've gained or liked the Ford Crown Victoria and Panther platform in general, make sure to watch one of these 2 videos up here above my shoulders. But at the end of the day, thank you guys so much for pushing us past 750 subscribers. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.